So this week's plan for the 1970 Eldorado is to go ahead and get the new engine all put together with the oil pan and a new water pump and get it all painted up in the gold color that we selected for it. Unfortunately, as I was going about putting things together, I discovered a little bit of a snag. There's an incorrect part that somebody put in this rebuilt engine. It's some sort of a fabricated aluminum piece where you should have a fuel pump eccentric, and we're going to go ahead and jump into some time lapse of me dismantling the old engine so that I can get the correct part out of it to put into the new engine so that we can go ahead and get that thing assembled for paint. So we're going to go ahead and jump into a couple time lapses, and then after that we'll come back and talk about what we're doing. Catch you in a few. So I'm going to go ahead and explain why we just went through the process of taking the front of the old engine in the Eldorado apart. So, as you can see, I took the front of the engine apart so I could cut a section of the timing chain cover off. Why would I do this? Well, the other day when I was going to assemble the water pump onto the new engine, I made a discovery. As I was looking into the engine through the hole for the fuel pump, I noticed this piece right here, a chunk of aluminum that somebody has cut and ground and shaped, and they had installed it on the front of the camshaft here. Now, this is a problem because that eliminates the ability to run a mechanical fuel pump, which is something I want to be able to do. Now, what this was replacing, what should be here, is the fuel pump eccentric. Now, in my spare parts and all the things that I have stored around here for Cadillac big blocks, I did not have a fuel pump eccentric. So what I did is I went and I cut the cover off of the front of the old engine so that I could get to that fuel pump eccentric. Now, what I'm talking about is this little piece right here. You can see how it's got this little stamped segment here. This locks into the camshaft just like so, and it sits off center, which presses up and down as the engine rotates on the push rod coming off of the fuel pump. So I'm really glad I found this little problem, because later on down the road, as I assembled everything, I would have run into a impossible situation where I could not have a mechanical fuel pump. Now, a lot of people like electric fuel pumps in the aftermarket and on hot rods, but I am not one of them. If at all possible, I prefer running a mechanical fuel pump. I think they're more reliable. And they have plenty of capacity, especially if you're running a carbureted system like this. Now, if you were running fuel injection of any kind, you would have to switch to an electric fuel pump. But since I am not running fuel injection and I am running a carburetor, there is no reason for anything other than the mechanical fuel pump, because this Edelbrock carburetor will take a maximum of 5.5 psi, which is approximately what a mechanical fuel pump will put out on average. If you put an electric fuel pump on there, you're going to run too much pressure and override the floats in the carburetor, which is no good. So I had to go ahead and take apart some of the old motor, which doesn't bother me too much. I have extra timing chain covers and other parts and pieces, and online they were wanting about $90 for this little thing here, if you can even find it, and that's ridiculous because I knew I had one right there. So I pulled it apart, and now I'm going to reinstall it on the new motor and go ahead and put my timing chain cover back on, and we'll move forward. So now we have the painted, brand new 550 cubic inch Cadillac big block. I'm pretty excited about how that came out in the gold. I think that's going to look really sharp in this car when it's all said and done. Now the intake manifold and the valve covers are just sitting here at the moment. They're not tightened or bolted. They're just loose. And the reason why I chose to do that is because it's going to be a little while before this engine gets to go into the vehicle and be fired. So I'm going to want to be able to get into the intake manifold and the valve covers to put a little bit of oil and assembly lube on all of the parts that are in there. But for right now, this will keep the dust out of it, and it gives us a chance to see how it looks. We got everything all reassembled from the little problem earlier I discovered with the missing fuel pump eccentric. So that's all back together again as it should be. We got a brand new water pump on here. We've got our timing mark indicator tab. And as you can see, the new oil pan is installed and looking good. And I also went ahead and made a new dipstick tube for it. That little groove you can see right there is there so that the dipstick will clear the cast iron intake or exhaust manifold. So that's looking pretty sharp. We got our Eldorado script, and it's just looking really cool all the way around. It's really exciting to see this thing come together like this, and I really am happy with the color and the look, and super excited I was able to use all of these factory components like the oil pan and the intake manifold and valve covers and so on and so forth to make an engine that fits my exact application without having to completely reinvent everything and fabricate pans and so on and so forth from scratch. So I'm pretty excited about all of that stuff, and we had really a good week this week getting this far. Even though we had that little setback with the fuel pump eccentric, I'm glad I caught it. That's one of those issues where, you know, later on down the road I'd be really upset if I couldn't use a mechanical fuel pump on this thing. So I'm glad that I found that and that we can move forward and everything will work as I wanted it to. Now there's a few more things that have to be done here as well. I'm going to need to get a thermostat for the thermostat housing, and I'll probably paint the housing itself black. And then I'll have to take all the pulleys and the crank snub as well and paint that and install it along with the pulleys. So there'll probably be a video down the road where we'll do all that work with the pulleys and get a good look at all those parts and pieces. But for now, that's pretty much a wrap for this week. And maybe next week we'll get back into the fabrication, maybe make that other side match this side with the louvers, or perhaps work on the hood. Who knows? There's all kinds of options with our good friend King, the 1970 Eldorado. And it's been real hot here, so it's been a little bit slower going, but I'm getting through there. You can see there's a little bit of a mess I made from coolant when I drained the radiator, so I could cut that front cover off that you saw in the earlier videos. So yeah, it's been a bit of a mess, but that's okay. We'll clean it all up and we'll get ready for next week's action. So that's going to do it for this week on the Eldorado. We got a lot of progress this week, getting the engine all back together again and painted, and we got through that little hiccup with the fuel pump eccentric, and it's looking really good. I'm excited to see the engine come this far. I think the gold is going to look really good on there, and it's nice to get that big part of the project checked off the list. And moving forward, we're probably going to go ahead and jump back into the fabrication on the other fender, maybe the fabrication on the hood. And so look for that next week. Hopefully we'll get into that kind of stuff. And try and keep cool out there. It's been pretty hot here, you know, upper 90s, pushing 100. So if you're outside, keep yourself cool and have a good one. And we'll see you next week.